When it comes to being a leader in our organizations, we grow, we change, we evolve, and it's hard to kind of always bring people along with us. Different people have different ideas about how an organization should grow and change. And especially if you've all been together since the beginning or you're pulling people in and out, it can be really tricky. So I'm really excited to have Steve Prentice here to talk to us about change in leadership and how to really kind of bring people along with you on the journey so that you can do more good in this world. Steve Prentice is a specialist in organizational psychology, focusing on the junction where people and technology interact. He helps people and organizations understand each other, the technologies they use, and the changes that these present. He's a speaker, writer, journalist, and university lecturer who focuses on human acceptance of cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and the future of work. His fourth book is entitled The Future of Workplace Fear: How Human Reflex Stands in the Way of Digital Transformation, and focuses on the one key fact: humans are driven by fear, and its roots are much deeper than they appear. Anyone who seeks to deploy digital transformation successfully must understand this. Now, we don't talk a lot about technology and growth necessarily in this episode, but more of a broad way that this can kind of be integrated into your entire business. How you talk, how you listen, how you work with your team, how you kind of build, grow, and scale. And it's just a lovely conversation that I think could be good for all of us to remind ourselves as we're building teams, as we're moving through different volunteers or transitioning our board into volunteers, how we talk with our donors if they don't know what we're doing, and how we can really get rid of this, well, this is how it's always been done. That's definitely something that is a pet peeve of mine. And if you're struggling with how to actually work through some of that with your team and your board, this is a great episode for you to do that. So I hope that you'll give it a listen. But before we jump into it, this episode is brought to you by our Website Wednesday live workshops. These happen once a month. They're totally free, no pitch. But if you stay to the end, I always give you a freebie. And there's different topics every month that have something to do with sprucing up or fixing up or just auditing and reviewing your website so you can get better conversions. You can learn about this next topic at thefirstclick.net/website-Wednesdays. I hope you check them out so that you can join in. There's no replay, so you'll have to join live. So get them on your calendar now. Let's get into the episode. You're listening to the Digital Marketing Therapy Podcast. I'm your host, Sammy Bedell-Mulhern, and each week I bring you tips from myself and other experts, as well as hot seats with small business owners and entrepreneurs to demystify digital marketing and get you on your way to generating more leads and growing your business. Hi there, everyone. Please join me in welcoming Steve Prentice to the podcast. Steve, thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a great pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
We haven't actually talked about this topic very much on the podcast, although I love this topic. So I'm so excited you're here. But we're talking kind of change management and growing into leadership roles. Why do you think change is just so darn hard for people, especially in the workplace?
Well, it's an instinctive problem, really. I mean, anytime there's something new coming into anybody's life, your instinct kicks in and says, hey, I don't know what this is. I'm not sure about it, so I'm going to opt with no. And that's where we start with pretty much everything. We are ruled by a desire to stay safe, and including in the workplace. Anything that is a new, novel change represents potential danger. And that's why people will push back, whether it's a management level or people just doing work. They're going to push back first until they get to know what it's all about.
Yeah. Well, and so, if you're in a lot of our audience are nonprofits that are kind of in that, wonky stage of, we've been founder led, maybe volunteer led. We have a board, but now we're switching and transitioning into hiring more staff, maybe getting more of a working board because our team is kind of taking over some of those responsibilities. And I feel like that transition is really tricky. And then the next phase, when they're really scaling and growing kind of after that medium phase, like those two places, I think are where a lot of people struggle with either letting go or kind of growing in and taking some of those risks. So I want to talk about this from a couple different places, but as a manager or a leader, how might we want to prep ourselves to kind of move into those leadership roles for ourselves before we even work through kind of building our teams to move through that transition as well.
Yeah, I think for ourselves as leaders first, being aware, as you said, that first of all you've got to have yourself in a mindset to accept and be willing to deal with change, and then you've got the second responsibility of bringing people, leading people into that change. So that's two different hats to wear. The rule that I always say is, whatever you don't know, whatever you fear, there is an answer for, and it's a matter of just seeking out what that answer is. Fear tends to grow very large inside people's minds when there's nothing to counteract it, because it's an emotion. And emotions are what carry us. We are ruled by emotions. So as leaders, as employees or workers, as volunteers, every decision we make is based on emotion first. So therefore, whatever the changes happen to be, we have to basically balance that out with knowledge. What are we going to do? What is the problem here? What do I need to fix? So that I can get a sense in my mind that there is a solution. It may not be easy, but having a solution, or at least having the steps towards it, are what leaders have to do first of all in their own minds, so that they can then have credibility as well as practical ability when communicating that out to the team as to what we need to do. So that's what it is balance the facts to meet the fear. That's my prescription for that kind of challenge.
So it's kind of like pulling the emotion out of it and just getting to, like, maybe if all of the parties weren't at play, if I was just here doing this work without the personalities or the people, what would I want to do? And then kind of pull some of those solutions together so you can more effectively communicate kind of where you're going.
Yes, exactly. I mean, the emotion that we have, we don't want to sort of suppress emotion, but we want to redirect that emotion into enthusiasm and vision. So, anything that causes us concern or fear, and it's the same thing for not-for-profits as it is for a for-profit corporation. We've got a bottom line, we've got a mission to do, and we think we're on the right track, and now something new is coming in. Yes, we have to understand what that change is, and we have to understand how that affects us as individuals, how that's going to affect us first, so we can actually make that change internally before externalizing it.
And I think one of the biggest things that I see is changing systems or changing approaches to, maybe fundraising, or, when we think about looking outside the box and how can we do things a little bit more creatively. The term, well, this is just the way it's always been done, I think is a killer of businesses. But that's just, I think, probably the fear talking, right? It's easier to just, what the results are, even if they're not awesome. So if, do you have any tools or ways that we can go about having conversation with people when we want to try to do something new? If we know they're kind of change averse, but we know we want to really bring in this new method, how might we want to approach that to kind of set ourselves up for success?
Absolutely. First of all, there's an acronym called THWADI, THWADI, which stands for That's How We've Always Done It. And people are very comfortable doing that. That's how we've always done it. Why should I have to change? Well, here's the reason why. Life is changing. The world is changing, and it's changing much more quickly than ever before. That's an opportunity. We think about the fact that looks like a crisis to most people, but it's actually an opportunity to say, hey, there are new ways to connect and reach out with people, to raise funds, to engage a community to work with us. There are new opportunities now. Just social media is a pretty normal thing, of course, but there are new ways to communicate and to interact and to fundraise and to crowdsource using social media. So the point is that there's an opportunity here to make the change. And I don't want to verbalize the second half, which is that if you don't make a change, you are destined to fall back and lose ground to others. Because even in a not-for-profit situation, we're still in competition for people's attention,
Absolutely.
For their funds, for their passions, for their engagement. So, change is happening. You've got lots of new, younger people coming in who are very, very comfortable with the newest of new technologies. There's terrific opportunity here to grow beyond what we used to know. So, yes, indeed, that's how we always did it. But that's the years of change are getting faster. I compare it to like dog years. We always thought about dog years as 1 in 7. Well, that's getting even faster now. So I would say let's grab this opportunity rather than thinking of it as a threat and saying, what can we use? Because the world is changing. It's getting more connected. And there's a lot of good in that we can leverage. So what can we look at as new opportunities?
Well, and so, you mentioned more younger people entering the workforce. And I think that's something also that nonprofits can tend to get into, where they just keep doing things the same way. And then all of a sudden they hit a space where they find their donors are aging out and they haven't kind of built in that next group of passionate people that can kind of fill that space. So
Exactly.
if you're a younger person entering and wanting to talk to management about trying something new, maybe it's even just having a conversation about finding a subset of people that you can test that on, right? So you're not changing the whole plan. Is it easier for people to take in incremental pieces? Because sometimes we get so excited about an idea, we're just like, let's go. I know I'm this way. Let's go. Let's do this. I don't have an issue with change and trying things out. So I tend to just like throw everything at people and then they're like, whoa, 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 whoa. So if you're like that, is it better to just kind of come in with some incremental changes? Hey, what if we just try this that you know in your head is going to lead to something else, but you don't have to lay out the whole plan right away?
Yeah, there are a few different ways you can introduce change, and one of them is incremental. It's actually known as the nudge theory, where you just sort of move people along little bit by little bit to get used to things that would have been a much of a cold shock if you suddenly said one day, "Hey, we're going to do this whole new way." So nudge theory is one, and what I'm saying is that as a leader looking to bring change to an organization, maybe you want to school yourself on one or two or three different opportunities and say, well, should we just nudge people along piece by piece? Or do you want to do a sort of a pilot project, where in which you would promote the idea in advance and say, look, this is a vision of a new and better way of doing things. A more exciting way to engage people by having perhaps more virtual meetings or whatever the issue is, but to give them a vision first. A vision is not about facts; it's about a feeling, a positive feeling about how we can fundraise better, how we can mobilize better, how we can serve our base, the people that we serve, better. And once that vision is in place, then say, okay, now here's the steps we can do to make this happen. So that's another change management technique, is to deliver the vision first and captivate people's emotions. And once you've got them in that captive state, now deliver the facts to say, here's how we're going to do that. So we want to give people a sense that they're not being threatened. So that's why a nudge theory works extremely well, for example, in terms of, let's say, pedestrian-friendly cities and some climate change concepts. People are getting used to things in small amounts, and so they're looking to grow upon each small victory to make the process even more effective over time. So my bottom line here is to say, as a leader, look at what would be the best way to introduce change. Number one, nudge theory. Number two, as I said, vision followed by facts. And number three, sometimes a cold turkey approach does work, in which we learn fast from either a positive or negative experience, say, we can't do it this way again. If you touch a hot stove, for example, your finger hurts. You learn not to do that, right? That's the easiest example. But you might also say, hey, the way we tried to crowdsource our last fundraising got no traction whatsoever. So what can we learn from that and change it that way? So those are three different change management techniques that, as a leader, I'd say, let's look at that and decide how would our audience, whether that's against your volunteers, your team, your administrative overseeing board, perhaps, how are they going to take this? But yes, it might indeed require some education to give people an awareness of what they are they're hiding from. Maybe you have people, let's say, on a board of directors or some sort of supervisory group who are afraid to admit that they don't know what TikTok is or something like that.
Yeah.
So they're hiding their skills and talents because they're afraid to lose face. So we can become sympathetic and say, yeah, I understand. There was a time when I didn't know how to save a document. That's life. So let's learn together. The enormous enthusiasm that comes when somebody gets over that hill and starts to feel good about what once made them feel fearful is a huge, powerful fuel that we can use. So education is really the one-word answer that I have for you here.
I'm hearing education and I'm hearing small wins.
Small wins, and celebrate those small wins all the way along. If you have a goal that's a year long, don't wait for the big reveal at the end of the year. Make sure to celebrate regularly. People need that nutrition of enthusiasm. They need to be fed small victories along the way. It's hugely powerful.
Yeah. Oh, I hear that. We literally just figured out that we could use eSign through Adobe Acrobat, which we already pay for. It just happened.
Yes.
It took 5 seconds, but we got real excited about that here. So
It's wonderful. So you celebrate, you
yeah,
say, hey
we're like,
guys,
woohoo, like that's going to
this
save
is
us time. And yeah.
fantastic. Absolutely. So every single thing, as a leader, every single thing you see that could be a good feeling, you know how, good feelings feel good
Yep.
naturally, but they don't tend to resonate as strongly as bad feelings. So we've got to make sure those good feelings are reinforced everywhere. So a little thing you say, well, big deal, DocuSign, big deal, Adobe. Yeah, it is a big deal because it's another step forward. So it's a
Yep.
cumulative good feeling momentum that you can build that way.
Yeah. Well, and then talk to me a little bit about, because I think, as your business starts to grow and scale, and especially if you're founder led and you're much more invested emotionally in the business, how can we kind of reel ourselves in? Because another thing that I'm hearing you say is leaders need to listen more when they're working on changing and scaling so that they can get the feedback, so that they can better have conversation, right? So you can meet them where they are to help them through the change process, right? So how can we as leaders maybe rein ourselves back in so that we're not just dictating and barking and talking at our teams, but instead kind of embracing what they need in order to kind of bring everybody along?
Yes, absolutely. You said it yourself. There's just one word, once again, listen.
Okay.
Leaders are great at guiding people, absolutely. But in order to gain that trust, we need to not only listen to people, but to demonstrate that we're listening. That's two different things. It's one thing to hear what people say. That's important because they're going to get feedback that is going to be very useful, first of all, for building that campaign and that strategy. But secondly, knowing that I have been heard, knowing that I have been listened to, once again, is an enormous liberating sense for me as a volunteer or an employee to know that you care. You care enough to stop and listen to me without telling me what to do. It doesn't mean that you're going to act on every single suggestion that I make, but knowing that I have been heard is one of those small victories that makes people want to stay with the team. So again, this is a nice, easy one-word answer, which you already identified, is to listen, but to demonstrate also that you are actively listening and that you care. And people love that kind of recognition because we want our team to stay, right? Whether they're volunteers or paid, we want people to stay on the team. And one of the key reasons that people leave a team, or even you as a consumer might leave a certain brand, is not the defective element of the brand. It's not feeling adequately cared for, whether it's customer service or leadership. People leave when they feel that they have not been cared for. So that's a magic solution that is not magic. It's just a matter of listening and showing that you listen.
Yeah, I can share a real life example that happened with me with a software company that we're kind of beta testing to bring into one of our membership platforms. And it's a new program, and I had sent them a message where, we're anticipating onboarding a large number of people and business owners. And when I wrote their customer service to say, hey, we'd really like this, is this a feature? Can we just embed your program directly into WordPress? I got a one-word answer that was, nope, not now, but you could put it in the roadmap. And if enough people do it, then we'll add it in. And I was like, well, you're not even taking the time to learn about what my business is or the value that we could provide to your business also with the number of members that we have. And you're just like shooting me over to something that's not going to give me any sort of results or solutions in any. So now we're like, we don't even necessarily want to beta test it because it was
Exactly.
just one word or like a one sentence response that had nothing to do with us. It was very canned. So I'm glad that you brought that up because I think that's critical.
You can imagine. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Now you could imagine that person at the other end was simply trying to be efficient by saying,
Correct.
no, it doesn't work on that program, works on this one instead. That's a very clear, cut and dried answer. But they haven't got the sense of customer service, right? I use the word customer service for anybody, not for profit or for profit.
Yep.
We're dealing with serving the emotions and the feelings of the people that you're dealing with. So that person might be able to say, hey, thank you, that's a really great idea. We can get to work on that and actually have it available for you in the format that you need. But you're totally right. You feel dejected, you feel not cared for. And in this era, people will just simply walk, whether it's, again, a particular brand they have been loyal to or a job. I'm not sure if you've heard of the term the Great Resignation, but people are leaving work because they do not feel it is worth it any longer. So that, again, goes back around to what we were saying before in terms of why should we do it a different way when that's how we've always done it? THWADI. And I'm going to say this is a different era, a very, very different era. And people are far more mobile and far more aware of their own power over their own time. And we've got to play with that. We've got to work with that rather than try and fight against it.
Yeah. Well, so, and also, because I think a lot of leaders feel like if they don't give the donor what they want, or if they don't give that board member what they want, then they're going to leave and take whatever, all this money with them. Mm-hmm. But kind of coming back to what you said a little bit earlier, in that when we take the time to really listen and hear people, even when we don't give them what they want, I mean, it's, I would assume, easier to have that conversation because at least they feel like you understand their perspective and you can give them a better perspective back on why you're not doing what they suggested.
Absolutely. I mean, this again now becomes the word negotiation, right? Mm-hmm. Everything can be negotiated. So yeah, if you have sponsors or donors who exactly that are worried that you're not doing things the way they expected, well, let's go back to the root cause here. Why are they involved in the first place? If it is because they want to assist in making change and supporting what an organization does, then we can explain how this is the new way to make this work, how to make their money, their brand, their reputation resonate more effectively than the old way. So it might indeed be, if we have a fear that you could lose a key board member because of the way we're doing things differently, then yes, our strategy is to explain that. What's in it for them? What's in it for their money? To actually be doing better, to be on top of the best practices that are happening right now. There's also, I like to always have an ace up our sleeves here to say, if we lose a key sponsor, a key donor, what was the cost of that money in the first place? Were they becoming a bit of a drag on the way we do things? I mean, of course, donations are great, but one door closes, another door opens. You can always lead to the opportunities of other things coming in. If that's, again, another key point that I like to use as a deflection against fear is that there's always something else that can happen. There's always a new person who can become the replacement for who we lost. So it's not always the biggest tragedy that we consider it to be. But bottom line, I'd rather work constructively first and say, this is where and how your money is being used. Look how great this is. And we're just renegotiating another relationship.
Well, and you're coming at it from an abundance versus a scarcity mindset, right? Opening up the doors. Yeah.
You recognize that the scarcity mindset is the default setting that we humans have. What's it going to do to me rather than what's it going to do for me? So again, we've got to always speak that language of turning that around to say, here's how this change is going to work for you and for us rather than against you and against us.
Yeah. Well, Steve, so many good things here. And I think this is, again, an episode that people will probably come back to. It's one that I hope that you come back to when you're in any period of growth, just as kind of such good reminders. But what other kind of tips for leaders would you kind of want to leave them with today?
Leaders find themselves to be in a position of constant, let's say, obligation to lead, both from a status standpoint, but also, they may feel that obligation. The key rule I always suggest for everybody is to apply the 80-20 rule to their lives, which means spending 20% of their time working on their business. I use that word business as just their busyness, really, rather than spending all of it, in meetings, doing emails, and doing all the things that their business is about. Self-improvement and awareness of what's going on in the world requires a little bit of time. We've got the best opportunity ever in human history right now to self-educate using even social media tools like Twitter, which I know has a lot of bad stuff on it, but also has some very good stuff in there where you can learn about what's going on in the world. So my advice to every leader is to get off that hamster wheel. Even if you have self-imposed, you have placed yourself in that hamster wheel out of your own sense of status or your desire for attention, and say, take some time to stop and look around. What else is going on in the world? Take some time to network, both on your peer level, but also with the people outside in other areas, because that's where growth happens. Once again, this is an era where growth is happening much more quickly than ever before. You can't set a 5-year plan as your one and only way of doing things. We've got to be a lot more agile than that. So my advice is for every leader, learn, continue to learn. Look at other leadership styles. Who do you admire? Whether it's new, young leaders or people who've been around for decades but have been doing well and thriving. who do you admire and who can you emulate? And also, who do you not admire? And do you share some skills with them that you can shed and get rid of? So take the time to continue to self-educate and self-improve rather than feeling obliged to stay on the hamster wheel all the time.
I think that's genius. And I think that alone would be kind of what pulls you out of that. Well, this is how it's always been done. Because if you're not ever looking for new ideas, then you don't even have new ideas to kind of fix, evolve, and change what you're working on.
Here's an illustration or a mnemonic that I'd love to share with people when I talk about this. People think about doing things the way they've always done it, like treading water. Like when you're swimming, you just simply tread water and you stay in place. But the problem is you're treading water in a river, which means that even treading water means you're actually being dragged downstream, away from safety, away from benefit and thriving. So we have to learn to keep swimming. Right? Just keep swimming, just like the famous fish saying, just keep swimming. But treading water, and that's how we've always done it, is by definition a guarantee of moving towards mediocrity or worse, because you can't stay in one place anymore. You got to keep moving forwards. So there's great pleasure in that. There's great excitement in that. It's just a matter, once again, of putting those facts in front of the fear to say, what are we going to achieve and how are we going to do it? And if I don't know, then you find out. You ask somebody. You bring someone on board and you learn from them.
Yep. That's such a good space, I think, to end this on. Steve, if people want to know more about you or connect with you, how do they do that?
You can simply go to my website. If I was to hand you my physical business card, it has one word, one thing on it. No phone number, no fax, nothing. No fax machines, of course. It's simply steveprentice.com. You can find out everything you want going right there. And thank you for asking.
Yeah, and we'll link all that up in the show notes at thefirstclick.net/167. Steve, thank you so much for this conversation today. It's got me re-motivated and excited to kind of jump into my work today.
Oh, it's been a pleasure, Sammy. Thank you so much.
Big thank you again to Steve Prentice for joining me on today's episode. I'm feeling inspired and motivated and ready to go. I hope you are as well. Let me know kind of what was your biggest takeaway? How did you feel about how this relates to kind of the struggles that you're dealing with in your day-to-day work life around change management and leadership? You can send me an email at hello@thefirstclick.net. But for now, make sure you subscribe wherever you listen and give us that 5-star review so more people can find us and learn about how to grow and build their nonprofit organizations. But for now, I'll see you in the next one.